Welcome to Beyond the Business Card podcast.
I was a crime reporter. I was a crime reporter of the Liverpool Echo, covering gangland feuds, covering murders, drug cartels, and I loved it. I instinctively think I know what makes people tick, I know what makes a headline, I know how to move people, how to inspire people through storytelling.
You clearly, when there's an opportunity, you've jumped at it, right?
Yeah, I think energy is everything in a business. Look, yeah, there's a huge sense of entitlement. And I think the kind of, the crypto culture, overnight millionaires.
From working on the gritty streets of Liverpool as a crime reporter to the bustling media landscape of the UAE, Gregg Fray's journey is nothing short of inspiring. As the founder of 7 Media, Gregg transformed his passion for storytelling into a thriving PR agency.
Because if you coast, you're toast.
Hi guys, and welcome back to Beyond the Business Card. It's me, your host, Justin McGuire, and today I've got Gregg Fray in the studio. Gregg is the owner of 7 Media. 7 Media are a huge brand, born and bred in the Middle East, over 120 people. And Gregg's got an amazing story about building a business, not even coming from a communications background, which is at the heart of what 7 Media do, and then building a local powerhouse that he has today. I'm intrigued and fascinated to get into the story. Gregg, welcome.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Good. It's very nice to have you here in the studio with us today. So tell me, Gregg, I don't really ever do sort of an intro justice. I've sort of done a 20-second, if that, intro there. Tell us a bit more about yourself and the business that you have.
I think probably the starting point would be, I think everyone starts with this. I arrived in the UAE in XYZ date, but I came in 2007 and I was appointed as one of the launch editors of The National, the English language broadsheet newspaper that we all know and love today. But I was part of that startup hired by the Abu Dhabi government to create a quality English language broadsheet newspaper out of the capital city. I was always a storyteller. I was a journalist in the UK, and it was one hell of a challenge and a great lot of fun. We built the editorial policies. We hired staff from all over the world. We built the newsroom. We test ran the newspaper for 6 months before going live with it in 2008. And I ran that national news desk as national editor for the first 2 years after launch. And that's kind of where the idea to launch 7 Media came from. Because while sitting on that news desk, we were getting press releases from PR companies, and I thought we can do better than that. And that was where the idea came from. We thought that nobody was doing story-driven, context-focused PR and communications particularly well, that represented Abu Dhabi and the UAE accurately, locally, regionally, and internationally. And 7 Media went from there, 4 people in a small office, to what we are today, which is a 360 communications with full video production. 40 people work at 7 studios, making documentaries and all sorts of different things. The best media relations in the region, social media, digital, programmatic, performance marketing, and everything that you really need to tell stories and put those stories under the nose of the right audiences. So that was really where 7 came from, and the kind of story of me in the UAE in a nutshell.
Gotcha. So you saw an opportunity and you jumped on it, right? And had you, up until that point, done anything entrepreneurial before?
No, and I didn't see myself really as an entrepreneur or as a storyteller. And I loved it. My jobs in the UK, I was a crime reporter. I was a crime reporter of the Liverpool Echo, covering gangland feuds, covering murders, covering clubland, international drug cartels, and I loved it. I loved it, and I never really had a great aspiration to get out of journalism. I really, really enjoyed it. I instinctively think I know what makes people tick. I know what makes a headline. I know how to move people, how to inspire people through storytelling. So really, it was just at that point when I was at the National, which had a sort of purpose-driven storytelling, was what the National was about. And I thought I could take that one step further, do it for ourselves. And making money wasn't really at the forefront of it. That was never the vision initially.
Okay, so we're going to get into this because I'm going to find out a bit more about the journey. But I want to sort of understand that you've touched on the Liverpool Echo, was it? You just said that you worked on. I want to go press the rewind button.
Yeah.
Just find a bit more about where you come from, your background, because from what I've learned from talking to multiple entrepreneurs, is the stuff, the interesting stuff actually is in the formative years, back in the early days. So tell us a bit about where you come from.
Well, I was born in Blackpool. We call it the Vegas of the north of England, and it's rather tragic seaside town. You'll know it, but I'm sure many of your audience might not. But with fairgrounds and donkeys and neon lights and casinos and arcades, and I grew up in a town next to that called Fleetwood, which is surrounded on three sides by water. Very working class town, extremely so. It was a trawler town back in the day. They had 200 fishing boats used to go out of there. I think about 4 do now. So it's quite it's a place that's had its challenges. And I came from there. And I think the interesting thing is, I just said it's surrounded on three sides by water, which means there's one road in, there's one road out. And a lot of people stay there, and I actually still own a house there. I'm very proud of the place. The seafront there and the promenade, it's absolutely beautiful. There you go, doing some PR for Fleetwood. But, it wasn't a place that suited my aspirations to go quite international and global. I remember being at school and there was a careers lesson. And they said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd quite like to get a grip and go to Hollywood. That was something, be involved somewhere in the film industry. And the teachers were just like, well, that doesn't happen to people from us. Just be serious. You weren't told the world is your oyster. You were told you're staying in this town, and do you want to go and work on the dock? Or if you're intelligent, do you want to be a teacher? That's about it.
Yeah.
That's certainly the way it felt. And I was pretty determined to get out and do something a bit more sexy. And journalism just seemed like sort of accessible. It wasn't too sort of highfalutin. And it was a way that I could do something, be involved in somewhere entertainment in some description, So that's kind of was my route out of Fleetwood. But as I say, I go back to my home. My family still live there. I own a house overlooking the sea on the seafront.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. But it will always be home. But now my life is much more global.
Gotcha. So what do you think drove that person to want to leave the town where it sounds like not many people left and sort of accepted that this was their forever home? What do you think made you want to think that you were special and different and want to leave?
I think that despite that at school you were not really encouraged that you could do anything, the world wasn't your oyster, so to speak. But I had parents who told me you can do anything, believe in yourself. Mum and a dad who just offered words of encouragement and great support. Try stuff. If it fails, you've always got a home. So I was encouraged to be able to sort of, I didn't take big chances. And to be honest, I've reasonably risk averse. Everything I've done has been a small incremental step on the last thing that I did. But I was motivated to sort of make a mark. Maybe I'm an attention seeker or something like that. I don't know what's at the heart of it really, but I knew there was more to life than the little fishing town that I was brought in.
And where have you got brothers and sisters?
I've got one sister. Yeah.
Are you older or younger?
I'm 4 years older than her. Yeah.
Okay. Did you ever feel sort of responsible for her when you were growing up? Did you think you needed to sort of show her?
Yeah, I don't think you overthink it when you're kids. I just think you crack on. Sometimes you have a laugh, sometimes you make fun of each other, and then you become adults and forge your own paths. We're very, very close. I've got 2 sons, Ollie and Evan, and she's got 4 sons,
right?
Aged between 3 and 13.
Yeah.
And my boys are 11 and 14.
Yeah.
So we have this 6 noisy group of people. So we spend a lot of time together, and we do lots of stuff as a family. Family is very important to me. I'm very close to all of them.
And your parents, are they still around?
Yeah, no, my dad died just before I launched 7 Media, actually.
Okay.
It was an interesting thing because my dad was probably the one that I would tell the most things to. So when I was leaving the UK to go and set up this newspaper in Abu Dhabi, And, I remember my dad saying, happy with what? It's near Dubai. And he was like, oh, right, yeah. He had no clue. But he was like, it sounds brilliant. That's just the way that he was. Um, I was worried about my mum's reaction about me leaving the country. Yeah. It was a big enough thing that I'd left the town. Then it was a big enough thing that I left one job to go to another one. It's like, my mum was a school teacher herself, and she was born in that town and still is there to this day, So I kind of forged my own path. But I would tell my dad was the person that I would talk to, I'm leaving the country, and he'd go, don't worry, I'll sort your mother. and after a couple of years, when I said, like, me and Matt, my now business partner, are going to leave our job at the National and set up on our own, he again said, I'll talk to your mum about this because it'll send her into a panic. He was a great sort of source of inspiration. Not in the fact that he was in any of the industries. He was a working class guy. He was a plumber. He was a union man. Quite the opposite of the capitalist world that I now find myself in. But I actually take a lot. I said this previously, and I take a lot of the values that he had about fairness, about when it was COVID and stuff. Seven Media was incredibly kind to people, and it was the words of my dad from many years ago that makes you not make selfish decisions, make decisions that benefit the people who work for you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And when you took the leap, so just so I can get this clear, you finished school. Were you a talented writer? Was it clear that?
Yeah, I was always good at English. My mum was an English teacher, and I enjoyed writing. I liked writing fiction and short stories and stuff like that. So I was a good writer, and I think I was quite outgoing as well. I did drama and sports and all of those things. I was always out there. I was never a quiet lad. I was good at English. Yeah.
Okay. And did you say, right, this is my skill which I can use to get out of this town? Did you hone in on that?
I first just went to university at 18 without having made a decision about what I wanted to do. And while at university, then you start thinking, and you start getting inspired by other people who you meet, as you well know, from other parts of the country with their own views and opinions and all of that. And you kind of, I thought that 18 to 20, 21 or whatever it is was really good formative years. I met some great people, and then you start having to go, right, what am I going to do when I finish here? And I'd done English and drama at university. And then I started going on work experience during my university breaks to the Blackpool Gazette, which is the local daily evening newspaper there. And I met a guy called Dave Pearce, who was the Fleetwood correspondent of the Blackpool Gazette. And all he wrote about was trawlers and history of Fleetwood. And I would sit there and I was like, well, okay, this is good, but it's not as exciting as I thought it was going to be. But then one day he brought me down to the head office, and it was a Saturday morning. And I got to go in and meet the news editor, who was a guy called John Brown. And John was sitting there in a leather jacket, and he was smoking a cigarette in the office illegally, when he was putting the Saturday edition together. And I thought, oh, this is more what I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
And John was a good inspiration for me, and he's a friend to this day. He later on hired me in another job, actually. So he, you kind of start something, get into it, enjoy it, do it more, and then make it your mission to take the next step, which is to get trained up and put in the hard yard as a nobody. And I did that. After I finished university, I got a job for it was like a traineeship for the Liverpool weekly newspaper group, as it was then called, and they paid me £60 per week. Sorry, hang on a minute.
£60 per week. I mean, that's pretty tough to live on that.
Yeah, I was just trying to think it was £60 a month, but it was impossible to live on.
Yeah.
I earned so little that I was eligible to get housing benefits from the government of £10 a week.
Right.
And I lived in a bedsit in Toxteth, which is one of the roughest areas of Liverpool for a year while I did that traineeship. But I learned a lot, and you kind of you go through all that, and I honestly think that when you're storytelling, I think that being working class but educated stands you in better stead sometimes than coming from a very privileged background, because you can identify with people on the streets of Liverpool who are important people to get the perspective of. But also I could interview the Prime Minister as well, because I'd been educated. So you kind of those formative years were quite something in Liverpool.
Do you remember what was driving you and motivating you at that time?
I just knew that I was good at it, and I knew that I could be good at it. And you go from a weekly newspaper to a daily newspaper, you then ascend the ranks, and then you have aspirations of doing something potentially international. But again, it was just day by day. I was motivated of getting my name on the front page of that week's newspaper. That was my goal on any given week.
Yeah.
When I was working at the weekly newspaper, and I did it very quickly. And hard work, good contacts, hustling. It's all the things that make you good in business, really, and knowing how to blag your way into certain situations, how to persuade and cajole people, to tell you stories, then how to analyze things, how to make things interesting, how to make a story have impact. And I was always, well, not always, but after a few years, I became quite aware of the kind of commercial demands of the publishing industry as well, and what my part in the bigger place was, if you know what I mean. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, but I was reasonably savvy early on about why.
What pays the bills?
Yeah.
Okay. And do you remember sort of in those days? So when you were at Liverpool, it sounds like you're not getting paid a lot.
Yeah.
In an area where it's ganglands and all sorts going on.
At that stage, when I'd started, I was more covering, summer fates and stuff like that. Because it was the weekly free newspapers that I trained on. I then went to a couple of daily newspapers, and then I can't remember the year, but at some point I got my really good job in Liverpool, which was the crime reporter of the Liverpool Echo, which is the flagship newspaper of the northwest of England, with a great impact. And that was in the heydays of that newspaper. It was, sadly publishing has somewhat gone awry in the UK now, but then it was boom time.
Okay. And what did you have a mentor? I mean, how did you manage to go from covering summer fates in Liverpool to all of a sudden being in the top newspaper that everyone, that the Echo is the one, right? I mean, it's famous.
Yeah. And I think I had the best job. I think I had arguably one of the best jobs in journalism in the country.
Right.
It was great at that time. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it's hairy at times. I got chased in my car and nearly ran off the road one time when we were covering a story of a topless model who'd knifed her partner to death through the heart in a steakhouse while they were on a date on Valentine's Day.
Oh my God.
And one of her family members took umbrage at our reporting of this case. It was exhilarating, terrifying, and rewarding all in one. But what motivated me was just doing the best job that I could do on any given day. I think I always had in my mind what was the next thing. So I think that when I was on the newspaper before that, which was the Lancashire Evening Post, I was like, I want to get to the Liverpool Echo. It's the best newspaper, and I want the crime job.
Yeah.
So it's just lobby for that, and do things that are proof points and to prove that you can do it and meet the right people. And fortuitously for me, the guy that I mentioned earlier, John Brown, who I met before I was even a journalist, at that point was the deputy editor of Liverpool Echo.
Okay.
So I had a
connection.
Yeah.
And so this guy sounds like he was your sort of early stage mentor.
Yeah. I would say so. Yeah.
And Do you remember what it was that you were doing? Did you have like a little secret sauce that was getting you noticed by? Because no doubt they're super competitive, right?
Yeah, I think it's just having a nose for a story. The writing isn't the most important.
Right.
The most important is finding things out that are valuable and can be positioned as news stories. I mean, we talk about this stuff that today you would call clickbait. But then there's really meaningful, important stories that you're telling that impact people's lives, and you're holding government officials to account, and you're breaking stories about corruption, and all of those different things. So, you just got to take the job seriously, do it properly, and work pretty relentlessly. I think when you're a journalist like that, you've got to go to sleep thinking about it and wake up thinking about it. You can't really, you got to dedicate your life to it, I think. That's not to say you don't have a life, because, I could integrate my life through all these things. I think if you're passionate about your work, I mean, if you're passionate about your work and you enjoy it, you can be fulfilled by that and not be bothered that you're on the phone to somebody while you're on your way walking into a restaurant for dinner with your wife. So for me, I could it's the typical thing of hard work, dedication, and a bit of nous.
Did you have like a network of informers that were able to give you tip-offs of what was going on?
Yeah. You kind of get that quite quickly. And the interesting thing there in that city, in Liverpool, is there was a saying that people will phone the Echo before they phone the police. So it was a very respected newspaper by the community.
Yeah.
And they would think it's important to tell the Echo. More important, the police, they had skepticism of the police force. So they would tell the Echo. You're like, tell the police, they sound serious. And then they would get there before the police at times onto the scene of something quite serious. So but then there were people who were, we had a guy who used to, I mean, it's illegal, but he used to listen to the police scanner. And we couldn't do that in the office because that would be breaking the law. But there was a chap who he wasn't even being paid by the newspaper. It just seemed to be his hobby. Call us every few hours, go, the police are on the way to such and such, the helicopter's up, and here's what's happened. It was a crazy thing. There was a lot of people willing to talk to you in that city at that time.
And how long were you there for then in total?
So I was the crime reporter of the Echo for about 4 years. I then went onto the news desk, and that's when you start really getting a picture of how newspapers put together, because you start to understand the production process. And it was a 6-edition daily evening newspaper with district editions, slip editions. So the news would change throughout the day. It would go to press 6 different times. So it was so current as it could be. And these were in the days before digital publishing was only in its infancy. It was a pale reflection of what a newspaper did at that time. So you kind of had to, on the news desk as a news editor, you have to become a human sponge. You have to get your head around 10 different subject matters in one day. A story will break in the morning that you're no way an expert on, and you have to become one in about 4 minutes in order to accurately report on that story that you're publishing now.
Yeah. I suppose you have been first dealing with press releases and all sorts when you're then as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you kind of knew that there's an interesting statistic at that time. There's a book called Flat Earth News, and at that time there was let's say 1 PR person for every 2 journalists in the UK. I think now there's like 6 PR people for every 1 journalist. So storytelling is increasingly controlled by press offices, by media centres, by PR professionals. But good journalists still exist.
Was that the days where people would try and take you out for a nice slap-up lunch or dinner, and that was kind of allowed to try and get you on the news desk?
Yeah, you'd people try and get the publicity stories published, but you'd be reasonably discerning about it. It's really interesting because, like, obviously I've done both things.
Of course.
But it's on the other side of it. So I always understood the dynamic as well. So when I did do PR communication, I understand what a journalist wants to hear, needs to hear, and how you would pitch a story to a journalist, having seen one for many years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what year is this? You're on the news desk?
2000 and let's say 2004.
2004.
Yeah. And then, so I was on the news desk, and then I was the news editor of the Liverpool Daily Post, which was more aimed at the kind of ABC One demographic. And then I became a deputy editor of the Daily Post for Wales. And at that point, I was brought into Trinity Mirror's national innovations team, at which point they were working on a move towards digital first publishing. Print ad revenues was sinking. And it was like, no, we need to get ahead of the game when it comes to the web.
Okay.
And it was at that point I was really enjoying the job. I wasn't looking.
Not quite as exciting though, the Welsh Post and the Liverpool.
Oh, you get some mad stories. It's not quite as exciting, but you get some of the most crazy stories in the
sheep incidents.
Yeah, things like this. Yeah, quirky stuff.
Yeah.
But that, like I say, I was enjoying my job. I always felt that I was, I was always happy. I was never like, I've got to get out of here because this is not good. Just always enjoyed work. I don't believe I've ever not enjoyed it. So when I got the offer to move to the UAE to
this is from the Welsh Post, you think?
Yeah, that's where I was at the time. So I got a call from Martin Newland, who previously been the editor of the Daily Telegraph, and it was like, do you want to come and help launch this newspaper in Abu Dhabi?
How did you get on his radar?
So a friend of mine was already working in the UAE, and he'd been working for different publishing houses. And this is, like I say, it's a small town, the UAE, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. So everyone knows each other, and conversations like, who's good? Who do you think would move? Who's motivated to do this? And so my name must have come up through a personal contact, and then I got the call to do it. And I think the thing is that Abu Dhabi, a brand new newspaper with proper investment behind it, serious journalists being hired. I was working with Bill Spindle from the Wall Street Journal was my opposite number on the business desk. Serious people from proper news organizations all across the world. I had a little bit of imposter syndrome on day one, actually, but no, I found my way quite quick. And the idea for me of launching something positive was really exciting, because in the UK, as much as I did not enjoy it, you were managing decline. You'd sort of celebrate if you'd only lost 2% sales.
Yeah. In print.
Yeah. In print,
yeah.
And it was really hard to grow a loyal online audience at that time. And, there was not a feeling of positivity at that point in the UK media. So here provided a great vehicle for me, which was, I think, is the last significant, genuinely, national print type in the world.
Yeah.
That I was involved in, and it was real positive, So that was really a big driver for me, the fact that they were serious about it.
Gotcha.
And the product was great when we got it out.
It sounds like the story that you've told thus far is you followed like the route when you said, I want to get into journalism. This is the route I can go, work for a high profile publication, then eventually get an international gig. You've followed the career, you've taken the career path, and you're on the right path, right?
Yeah.
Had you sort of accepted that you were going to be a journalist all your life? This is for me. Or did you have aspirations to do something bigger and better at that point?
At that point, when I joined the National in Abu Dhabi, I was very happy being a journalist, and I wasn't thinking I've got to do something else, or I'm hugely desperate or motivated to do a different type of career. But I think that being here, and this, you get caught up by the bug of there is a can-do attitude.
Absolutely.
A feeling of positivity, a feeling of development, and you want to be part of it. And, I felt I was in the right place, the right time. The core skill sets that I had about purposeful storytelling were needed in this country at that time. So it was just sort of a perfect moment.
Yeah.
I'd also made a lot of contacts, because when you're doing the national, you have to understand the 2030 plan. You have to understand the vision of the UAE. You have to understand the geopolitics. You have to understand the country's place in the GCC. You have to understand, the politics of everything from OPEC to whatever. So you have to speak to a lot of people, and that's what I was doing. So I was coming into contact with people holding serious government offices, people who were very influential captains of industry, who were shaping the story of the country. So meeting those people, I knew that I could offer them something.
Yeah.
I was like, so that we were able to go, when we decided we were going to launch Seven Media, we got big clients early on.
Well, you had all the connections. I mean, you had such a great bird's eye view of what was going on. It was, I'm going to guess from what the story you've just told, that you've arrived to a giant startup, right?
Yeah.
And everyone, entrepreneurial bug has sort of been created as a result of being in a giant startup and seeing how something can be launched and grown and go for it.
Yeah.
And you've kind of been caught up in that. And then as a result, like all of us, I mean, I came out here to get a job and eventually end up setting a business. Like all of us, the entrepreneurial bug was sort of implanted on you when you saw what was happening out here.
Yeah. I would say you're exactly right. And it's infectious, isn't it? Positivity is infectious.
Yeah.
So the UAE does that to you. And it's just the type of people. Think about it. When you go to a barbecue or something like that in Dubai, as compared to the UK, you meet all these people with these great, inspiring stories. In the UK, you might be there and there's a bricklayer and a postman and something like that.
Yeah.
So you just have the barbecue. It's a nice burger.
Yeah.
But here, you walk away with something different. You walk away with a bit of a fire in your belly and another contact and another thought about what I could do next.
Yeah.
And the great thing about Seven Media, I think, is, we launched it as a PR company.
Yeah.
But media is so dynamic and exciting that we were then, quickly, video production is the big thing. So we got right ahead of the game. Digital marketing and social media. We have partnerships with big global event companies and things like that. So you can tell a story in any different way. So it develops. And like I say, I was never looking years down the line, I want to make a fortune. But I always look at what's the next thing. This is great now. What's next year? What's my goal for that? What do I? It's not even where do I want to be in the end.
Yeah.
And it's seldom about money.
Yeah.
Typically it's about keeping myself interested, inspired, having many goals that I can aim towards and attain, and then get self-satisfaction and then tell all my friends about it while I'm having dinner.
But it's interesting because what we can tell from the story that you've gone through so far is, in each of the jobs that you've had, you've spotted an opportunity and quickly managed to jump ahead of someone, right? You have, like, that's how you got out the small paper. That's how you got into the Liverpool Echo. That's how you jumped in the newsroom. That's how you then got the big job at the Welsh Post. That's how you then got noticed by the Trinity Mirror Group. These, you've clearly, when there's an opportunity, you've jumped at it, right?
Yeah.
And you've done exactly the same when you arrived in Abu Dhabi, except the opportunity you've spotted is, hey, I can do something myself now.
Yeah.
But in those days, I know this from having set up my own business then, that's not an easy exercise. And you're in Abu Dhabi as well. It's, you've got there's a bit of capital you need behind you, setting up an agency. Yeah. Okay. To a degree, it's not one where you instead of a manufacturing company, but you need some money behind you, etc. Yeah. What made you go from this person that's been employed, like working for a number of established firms, and they were established, to then going solo? What there's a big trigger there, and I want to understand what that is.
Yeah. I think that, as I say, money wasn't the big thing, but freedom and flexibility and, ownership and pride, I suppose. A bit of ego, perhaps, behind it. We're big motivators for us launching Seven.
Yeah.
But you talk about the risk I didn't feel was huge. We never took any credit or any loan. So over the period of time that we were at the National, myself and my business partner, we saved up every month for the 2.5 years that I worked there. I got a decent enough salary and, was able to put money to the side. So by the time we launched it, we had a few 100,000 dirhams to put in the bank. Some of that went on a business license. We didn't have fancy offices. We didn't want to put our name in neon lights and, all of that kind of thing. It was about doing good work that matters and doing that over and over again so that you could grow sustainably. So I didn't feel like we were taking that big a risk.
Okay. And where did you see, like, obviously, when you've arrived, you're a journalist, you've seen that the quality of the PR companies that you're working with, you've obviously seen that that's not necessarily the standard you thought the industry deserved. Just give everyone a sense of what the lie of the land was like then.
I think that there was a lot of international corporate PR companies who parachuted in 10 Americans into Abu Dhabi, trying to apply the same rules that they apply in the States to corporate communications. And there was a press release culture, and it was just boring. And
just ping out a press release for anything.
Send out a press release via an email.
And would it get printed?
Well, frankly, yes. But then that was part of the problem. Things did just get cut and pasted and printed in a lot of
I remember when I first arrived, this is exactly what I used to see, because I worked in comms agencies and you could spot a press release a mile off,
Well, and that's when I talk about context, I think that's what we were adding to the party. I'm not saying that people weren't good at the jobs or professional, but I felt like we could add something else to it, like proper storytelling.
Yeah.
And context as well, not just this is, but trying to explain to the community here, to the region and to the world, not just the what, but the why, and we kind of had that was what the National was doing. We applied those principles of those newsroom principles to the launch of 7 Media.
Gotcha. How did you find a business partner?
He's my best mate. We worked together at the Liverpool Echo.
Okay.
Matt Slater. We spent our careers together from our early 20s. We bounced off each other. We just enjoy each other's company, and we're 50-50 owners in the company. And there's periods of our time where I've been his boss, he's been my boss. I've been, but we've always worked together really, really well. That's okay. And so again, the launch of 7 Media came with, like, we just spent time, we spent our social time together as well as our work time. And it was like, what if we did such and such? And
chat away over a beer, over a golf course,
Exactly. The idea was actually born at I don't know, over time, but at the old academy of the Montgomery, where we had a nice terrace, which has been sadly decimated somewhat now. But that's where we would sit after work or whatever, or at the weekend, and we'd have a little game of golf, and then we'd have a drink, and it wasn't like a business plan, like sort of someone might sit there and write a business plan. It was done by
back of the fact
conversation, and then just taking advice from a load of different people who launched their own businesses about kind of how you go about it, how you do it. And it's not that hard, is it? Yeah, really.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, once you've got an idea, look, I think the world doesn't need more ideas, people. The world needs executors of the idea, right? If you can execute the idea well, then it'll work. But I'm in my position of running a recruitment business and being out here for a long time. I can see Dubai's had a lot of ideas flush through it. The world has a lot of ideas flush through it, but there's not a lot of good executors. Agency landscape it's a bloodbath, right? So as easy as it is to set up, there's not a lot of people that can sustain, right? So it sounds like that you were very fortuitous from the partnership perspective.
Yeah.
You didn't need to go out finding a partner. You had your best buddy with you.
And I think having a partner is really important to me. Like, I don't know whether I'd have done it alone. I don't think I would have done it alone.
Right.
I don't know whether I would or I wouldn't. But having a partner really worked for me, because you're halving the kind of risk. You've got someone to turn to. It's not all in your own head. I have great respect for individuals who go out by themselves and just do it and build everything alone because it's hard. I need someone to talk to.
It's sort of that's what I've done. And then, yeah.
Well done.
Thanks. And then I went looking for a partner later because what I realized, first of all, a mistake I made, Greg, was I opened up in a completely different part of the world while still trying to run things from Dubai.
Right.
So I bottlenecked myself completely.
Yeah.
And also I nearly killed myself. That obviously running different time zones where decisions are made with you, it was very evident I needed to get, once I trusted someone, I needed that person to be vested into the business.
Yeah.
So that was a big lesson. And actually a lot of the failures that I've had, and I've set up 2 or 3 things, and we'll get on to maybe if you have, where they failed is where I've tried to do too many things. I've tried to be too many things to all people.
Yeah, no, I get told this by my wife as well. I have lots of ideas.
Yeah.
Variously this year, I'm helping launch a reality TV show, which I'm going to be on. I'm currently writing a book. I've got an independent media publishing platform that I want to get off the ground. And I've just launched 7 Digital at the start of this year, and that needs some love and attention to build it up. I've some various investment stuff going on. There's a product that I'm working on with my wife, and I sometimes get told, "Buddy, just pick a couple of these." But I'm enthusiastic.
Also, you're like a Jack in the Box entrepreneur, then, right? Because you were up until this point, before starting the business, you were a steady Eddie, right?
No, that's true.
And then all of a sudden, kaboom! That's it, So, look, when you made that decision, because there's a lot of people listening and watching this have ideas, right? But taking that first step, I mean, the way perhaps you and I talk about it so casually, it's a lot harder than that, though, isn't it? Really, it's taking that leap to set up a business is a giant one. Also, if you've got, were your wife partner with you at the time? Did you have responsibilities?
Yeah, I mean, look, my 2 children were born in Dubai. In fact, my son Ollie was born about 8 months or so after 7 Media was launched.
Okay.
So it like literally that same year. So you've got a kid, and and then that became 2. You have certain responsibilities, but again, I never felt that we were taking that big a risk because we weren't borrowing any money. We had Matt and myself had each other to kind of rely on. We had a little float that we'd saved up that could pay us a modest salary for a few months, and then it was just a case of get some contracts signed.
And you believed in your idea. You had the network.
And we had lots of promises of people who would sign contracts with us. One of my biggest learnings, though, is never listen to people who say that until the ink is dry on the contract, because everyone has the will to work with you because they like you, right? But then when it comes down to it, they've got to get sign off. And then, you want to go with this new startup when we've been using this company over here? You have to change. It's a risk. And so, of 10 promises, maybe 2 came through, which is fine. Good. But
2 you didn't have.
That was one of our biggest learnings. Stop celebrating things that have not yet been fully won.
Yes.
And we kept thinking things had been won, and just because someone said. But it's much more than somebody said, as I now know, with procurement processes and all.
I did that as well.
Things. I think most people do, and that it's that's positivity. It's not a terrible thing. It's a bit of naivety, but it's actually the one thing that I tell people who are starting things up now. That's my one of my learnings that I would tell people. Don't count your chickens. Just you got to get deals done before you celebrate them, and don't spend money before it's arrived. And, and
that's a valuable lesson.
So we grew, busted our asses, and we built business, and grew into built and grew and grew. We never took big steps of huge investment hires in the early days. It was just hard work to create something sustainable.
Now, I've seen you share. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I've seen you've been obviously the recently Map has 15 years. It looks like from looking at your LinkedIn, it looks like you're reflecting a lot on the early days at the moment. Right.
Yeah.
And there's a post you did recently where you had 4 of you sat around a desk.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting because I've got similar pictures as well.
Yeah.
And I look around at the 4 people at that desk. It was my mum's best friend's son. It was a bloke who couldn't really speak English, but you know, I didn't really have much choice but to hire. But he did our creative recruitment, and it was 4 misfits. It was a guy I lived in Latin America for a bit. There was a guy I flew over from Latin America, and he'd never been from the Middle East. You know, there was the 4 of us sat around a desk, and actually we went on to build something that did really, really well. And I look at those scrappy days, if I'm honest with you, I get quite emotional when I look at it, because I think of what we created, the 4 misfits around that desk, what we created. And I got the sense from your post, because they're still with you, those staff, aren't they?
Yeah, the people from the start are still there.
Which is very rare, by the way, as well.
There's multiple people who are 10 years plus with 7 Media. So we've got a really good, solid, loyal crew of people who remember days. And one of the big things I'm saying now, 15 years on, we got to recreate that energy. You've got to recreate and find that startup fire.
Okay.
Because there are real startups now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who want to take...
You're an established player. You're not,
exactly. So now we're no longer the underdog. The big thing for us was celebrating.
Yeah.
We've won a bit of business off this major global company. We're chipping away at their ankles, and we'd celebrate everyone. Now there's people who want to do that to us.
Yeah.
And if we're complacent,
they'll do it.
That's what will happen.
Yeah.
So we've got to always have that same spirit, that same energy. And it's sometimes, you know, a challenge to keep that going with that same enthusiasm, which is why there's always new things and reinventions and refreshes and different ways of working and everything to keep everybody fresh. Because if you coast, you're toast.
Now,
I just made that up.
Yeah, I liked it, by the way.
Phrase.
Coast your toast. Look, getting to hear your story now and talk about your background doesn't sound like you were at a point where you were running full P&Ls. Doesn't sound like you were at a point where you'd hired lots of people before.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like you kind of, other people that I've spoken to, they ran a business. They were owners within a business, right? And then they took the side step, and they kind of had a lot of the skills from being effectively an owner for someone else's business. Sounds like you guys didn't have that. You've seen an idea, you've jumped in, you've gone for it. People are biting. You've got a great network. You then start to hire. Right now, talk to any business owner, and it's ironic me saying this as a recruitment business owner. I fully understand that, but hiring comes with lots of challenges in this part of the world. Quality, the quality can be at times quite, not that great. Let's be frank. Also, it's a very transient market. Some people, this isn't their forever home, and you learn that very quick. So, how did you manage to hire? Build, and I bet you've got some stories in there that could be of value to the audience about what went well and what didn't go so well in those early days.
Yeah, I think the first 8 hires were journalists or junior PR people. One of the things that you're quite right, we'd not worked in that environment before, so we had no systems. Our client list was handwritten on a whiteboard. we didn't have we had a proper spreadsheet. We would write in a Word document like like what the clients, what their responsibilities were, and when the billing dates were. And Matt would manually send invoices to people and chase them up, and he would sit over the bank account. So we had no, CFO or even an accountant at that stage. You didn't actually. It was only after a couple of years the rules around being audited by a Emirati accountant came in. So we kind of just felt our way. And then we got to about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 people. We had a really good team. The enthusiasm among everybody was palpable. We were this startup, scrappy, independent company that wore that like a badge, we had a different way of doing things. And
I can imagine it suited you guys. Like getting to know it, you would have loved that.
I absolutely did.
Yeah.
And, you felt like the sort of rock and roll stars of Abu Dhabi PR. Well, you can imagine such a thing. But we got to a certain point, and this is where I'll name check who's now our COO, who is called Kelly McClements. She came in after about 3 years of us being involved in Seven, maybe a bit, or 3, 4, 5 perhaps, as office manager, because the place was a shithole. You know, we nothing was organized. We had no systems, and she was from an entrepreneurial background. Actually, she actually ran her own recruitment company back in Ireland, and then came out here and started. So she was a real gem to hire because she really knew her stuff, but she also was disciplined around systems and you know, organization and how a company should really look. You need that at some point because you can't continue to grow. You would head for some kind of disaster if you didn't have that. So she brought in everything, and then over the years as we've grown, has reshaped things, has done everything from the HR. She hired who's the commercial director and all of these different people. So she runs the whole operations of the company. So there are certain hires that were key, but the early hires was just, you know, a mix of good people. I knew what was needed as a team to put everything together. It's a little bit like a football team, isn't it? You know, you kind of need some, exactly. Youth, experience, people who were, you know, you need 2 centre backs who were solid, but then you need a couple of flair players. So all of those different things. It's about the mix of people, and you know, I think we got that. Of course, it wasn't always perfect, you know, but then we could hire in, and we hired people sometimes on longer term freelance contracts so that we were safeguarded. And you know, if things were to drop off, and then they would become full members of staff when we were confident that we had the work to sustain them into the future, because you know, you've got a responsibility to people. You're hiring them, you're taking them out of other jobs. You can't then, you know, let them go after a couple of years going, it didn't really work out that. You know, that's on us. So you've got to be certain.
It is on you, but it's on them as well. You can't just keep people on for the sake of keeping people on.
Look, if people don't perform, people don't last. But they come to that realization themselves pretty quickly.
Do you think?
Yeah. I think that people know when they are not contributing. And I think that you can usually, in my experience of, you know, people having to leave because they're not, it turns out they're not a good fit or they're not dedicated to it. The conversation becomes apparent quite quickly that they're quite happy to be free of this. You know, I think people know. People are intelligent. You know?
Do you? So you've gone from grown quite quick by the sounds of it. You've gone to like more than 10 folks. In a part of the world where even back in those days, it's not the cheapest place to have staff. You've also got to give visas, medical insurance, all the grown-up stuff that you have to give. And you're in a part of the world where actually, you know, let's be frank, it can be quite hard to get paid. How did you? I can speak from my own experience in those early days. And I remember cash flow being some of the biggest concerns that we had. Didn't even have a CFO by the sounds of it as well.
No, we didn't. But I think we had some, even now, we have some clients that are on, like, they're not on 90-day payment terms. I think they're all on 30. They pay after, you pay whenever. Some of them are big clients, but you know the money will come because they're big government clients or whatever.
Well, you have to have that trust. But my point is that you've also got people to pay.
Yeah. And I think that I don't know, I suppose maybe we were lucky.
You were lucky.
I think that we had good, like, you know, we had pretty good, honourable clients. Like our first significant client was actually Abu Dhabi Media Company, and they'd just bought the rights to the English Premier League. So we had to launch their new pay TV network. I mean, they're a semi-government organisation. We had to enthuse people about English football. We had to manage players when they came over, to do press with them. All of those things. Now, they paid quite a chunk of money and they always paid on time. So there's a few clients like that I guess form the backbone of the cash flow. And that allows...
You had foundation clients.
Allows others to dilly-dally with their payments. But when we started getting more organised, I mean, it's almost a full-time job now for somebody to chase money to make sure things are getting paid on time and all of that. But perhaps we were just, you know, fortunate back then.
And you and the the fortunate aspect was you had these sort of huge, like great sort of Goliath clients that could prop you up, which is very hard to get for a startup, because normally in startup world, you have to go for the scrappy SMEs because they're the ones which are prepared to work with this new upstart. What do you think made you have the ability to pitch for someone like Abu Dhabi Media and win that business?
It was the reputation that we forged while at the National.
Yes.
And the contacts that we made there. And the ability to, people knew we knew how to tell the story. There were questions on, how well we knew the Arabic language Saudi Arabia market, but that was why our first 2 hires were Arabic.
Well, what you needed, so you could counter that.
And it was a guy called Yazan, a guy called Janti, both of whom still work at.
Yeah, I saw on the post.
Syrian guys, really talented, really good lads.
Yeah.
And so we kind of just plugged the gaps, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was based around, and I think probably continues to be based around my own and Matt's sort of personalities.
Yeah.
And while we do have some good people who've stuck with us, a lot of people have also come and gone over the last 15 years.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, I don't know how many drummers did Oasis go through, but Liam and Noel were able to bring in more, right? Sorry, it's a rather ridiculous analogy.
I think it's a great analogy.
But, you've got your guiding principles, you've got your vision, you've got the personality and the kind of the core that you make sure always runs through the agency from top to bottom. Yeah. And then people can come in and they know what we're all about.
Gotcha.
I think that's key to it.
Yeah. So one of the reasons I set up this podcast, right, is when I was looking at, I was looking at growing. So I've entered into the sort of growth consultancy space. So I help entrepreneurs build businesses now, right? And I wanted to learn how to do that. So I reached out and found mentors that had helped other, that had done well in their industry and that have then coached and built successful coaching businesses, right? And I reached out to them and ended up working with them, but it sent me down this rabbit hole of going down YouTube, which is something for whatever reason I hadn't really explored before. And constantly I found people who were these sort of quick upstart entrepreneurs who sort of built a business in 2 years and made out they were driving Lamborghinis. Lots of people that sort of seem to become successes overnight, but they never really told the story, right? And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, I didn't get to entrepreneurs until I was in my early 30s. I've grafted for 10 years, and up until today, there's been the good, the bad, and the ugly. I've gone through recessions, downturns, who knows what, right?
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's bollocks. There's no one I can't believe these people are successful there. And it turns out, of course, it is bollocks. And the key take home that I'm getting from you guys, you and Matt, is how old were you when you set up the business?
30.
Okay.
No, 32.
32. Similar age to when I set up. So you grafted for a decade, right?
Yeah.
You got, it's fair to say you knew how to be, you were a good journalist, right? Yeah. You knew how to make contacts. You knew how to sit in a room. You knew how to network, right? So every single one of these skills that you'd spent 10 years procuring, they've all served you so well. This is why you've had, by the sounds of it, from a lot of entrepreneurs I've spoken to, Greg, you've had a pretty good runway into running a business, right? And you've managed to fall back on your experience and your contacts to do that. Yeah. So the let's take home from this is get a good, learn on the job, right? Pick up those skills and don't just jump into something. You must see it now that people become entrepreneurs, set up agencies, set up businesses when they've got a fraction of the experience that you have.
Yeah. There's a huge sense of entitlement, isn't there? And I think the kind of, the sort of crypto culture, overnight millionaires, and you have people, talking about hustle and all of that, but they don't really know what it means. It's like you say, it's just a hard yard. Grow something sustainably and it'll work. Now, there are people who can become an overnight success these days in Web3, in tech, but they'll have been highly educated in the background before they did it. Yeah. It's not like, any old Tom, Dick and Harry can just...
Yeah, but I've met some of these, let's call them, I bracket them like lottery winners, right?
Yeah.
Because they tend to lose it all as well. They've got no sense of what to do with their money. They don't have anything back to invest it back into. They don't really seem to have a business or a purpose. And sometimes I feel quite sorry for these people, unless if it's hundreds of millions, and of course then, they're laughing at me. But intrigued to know, because you've made it sound to a degree easy, right? What would you have done differently in those early days?
That's an interesting question. Knowing what I know now, what would I have done differently? Truthfully, nothing. I don't
Really?
think. Yeah, honestly, I'd be making something up, I think, if I,
Okay.
just to
Yeah.
purpose of answering the
Yeah.
question. I think that we enjoyed it. We went along with the ride. We did it by touch and feel, and nothing went horrendously wrong. We embarrassed ourselves a couple of times early on, perhaps by not knowing how to do a proper PowerPoint presentation when we went into a pitch with a guy who reminded me of it the other day. It was for the FIFA Club World Cup, and we wanted to do the comms. And me and Matt, it's a huge, huge event. It requires like a whole media centre and press office. 4 of us at the time. We went in, and it was like we weren't presenting comms strategy. We were presenting pretty good sports stories that we could tell around the Club World Cup coming to Abu Dhabi. So we didn't get that contract, but even that was a learning. I'm mates with the guy who we pitched to now, and he's hired us separately with Sony, and he hired us separately to work there.
Gotcha.
So, we have a laugh about it.
Yeah.
I think if you remove some of those
Yeah.
sort of messy, rough edges and loose ends, you probably take away a bit of the fun and a bit of the learning, and a bit of the personality of what we were.
Talking to you, you're very humble the way you come across and the way you talk about the experience. And I think knowing, having been in the region for a long time, and also knowing a lot of your competitors, it's a very different approach I imagine you had going into a room. They're very different set of personality, very different, honest, not afraid to be who you are. It's a very different approach, and I imagine that really served you well and enabled you to stand out.
Yeah, well, look, we all know there's a lot of bluster and bullshit, isn't there? So perhaps that's a good thing, and probably my upbringing makes me like that. Well, definitely my upbringing makes me like that.
I think it's authenticity.
Yeah, I think so. And I think honestly, where do you learn to communicate? You learn to communicate probably when you go to school, and go to school in that small, fairly rough fishing town. Well, you need to learn quite quickly how to play schoolyard politics, who to align yourself with, how to use comedy to deflect from difficult situations, when to run away, when to stand your ground, how to manipulate certain situations, and all of that kind of thing. But really, it gives you your grounding in how you operate in the world. So everything adds up to something, I suppose, doesn't it? Throughout your life.
Yeah. So I can understand why this formulas work so well in the early days. I get it, from the way you've spoken about it. I can see it. But comes a point where you're 120 people now, right? There comes a point where you can be the scrappy 15, 20 person business, but then shit becomes real, right? And it needs to stop being the Gregg and Matt show, right? It needs to become 7 Media. Yeah. So at what point did you acknowledge that this was turning into something, and what did you do to put pillars in place to enable you to scale? Because a lot of people fall down at this point. They do not know how to get that past that point. I had a 50 person business. I'll be honest with you, I didn't really like it. So how did you get through that?
Well, there's a tip. I think there's a certain tipping point where two people who almost act as one, right? So we're like one Uber CEO, right? And I suppose that actually is a real benefit. But you get to a certain point where you're probably about 28 staff that can't all be managed by one. So you have to then start segmenting things and creating systems of reporting. But then what it's about is culture. And that by which I mean the culture of work. I think the word culture, by the way, has been hijacked and bastardized now by people who think it means not working, or working from home, or having free fruit in the office, or something like that, or doing yoga at lunchtime. That's not what culture of work is. Culture of work is a collective spirit towards something. That's got to be instilled from the top down, and then it's just about making sure that the right people with the right culture overseeing smaller groups of people. Really, I mean, it's not that difficult. And then and having an operations team, I suppose, who can do the stuff that's non-creative, so that the storytellers and the videographers, the social media people, and don't have to get bogged down in that. They can just focus on what they have to do. And then it's about providing structure and systems, but still with the freedom to work within those and not making them too restrictive. we had a whole thing where I read a book actually called The Peter Principle, and it's about how people get promoted to their level of natural incompetence. By which I mean, in order to get paid a bit more money, typically people have to go up to the next thing. Now they do that until they get to a thing they can't do, and then they languish in that job for the rest of their lives. So I was always like, just get the best out of people, and if people show promise to go, right, okay, I can then manage a group of people, great. But don't just do that because that's the steps up. So we didn't have that kind of hierarchy in place, which I find terribly restricting and strangulating for people. Because if you look at certain companies now, if you're a junior, you don't feel like you've got a voice. But at Seven Media, I always like to think that everybody can come with an idea, and if your idea is good, you might have only got a few years experience, but you're running that project, and there's people who will have the respect to report into you who are more senior by title and age and all of that kind of thing. So I think the way people work together is important, but you've got to create that culture and that spirit. Otherwise it doesn't work.
Sounds great, but it's people, right?
Yeah.
And but that's still, when you're growing a fast growing business, and you guys were a fast growing business, learning on the fly a little bit as well, right? Also, you're the, how do you stop yourself from being the bottleneck in your own business as well? Because surely all decisions were flowing up to you guys.
Yeah, they are, but I've never seen the HR handbook. I've never looked at any of the stuff. I trust the people who are doing it to take the overall ethos and vision of this company. I will know broadly what it will say in the HR handbook. It won't be hugely restrictive. It'll be as we set things, so I don't get bogged down in stuff. I've never been a micromanager. You've got to set a way of working and a set of standards and a vision and a North Star, and set everything around that, but give people the freedom to create within it.
We haven't talked about Matt's skill set and your skill set. So quite often, some people, the founders that I meet, their strengths and weaknesses, they fill different slots, right? So what would you say that you bring to the table and that Matt brings to the table that's complementary?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably if you look at we probably have 70% of shared skills in the middle, and then 15 on my side and 15 on his side. Certain things, but we have a lot. We have a very symbiotic way of working, to be honest with you. I know we know what each other are thinking. We've just done it for so long in multiple different walks of life, socially and otherwise, in work and journalism. But I mean, there's certain things where he's a little bit more, perhaps a little bit more ruthless than I am over certain things. I can, I'm. You won't mind me saying this, I'm possibly a better manager of people than him. But together we work quite well. And but I've changed during the business as well. I used to hate talking about money. Like, we used to go into meetings, and when it came to the bit where we were discussing what we'd get paid, I'd go, I'm going to go and leave Matt to this, because it's awkward for me. I didn't like it. I've changed just from, you know what I mean? Like,
doing
over
it a few
time.
times, yeah.
But I never used to like talking about money and stuff like that, but he was fine with it.
Right.
And and he has a great confidence and a great strength and self-belief that rubs off on me as well.
Okay.
You sort of pick up by osmosis. I was never shy or anything like that, but that's why I'm glad we had each other. I think he would say exactly the same thing. Well, he does say it regularly.
Okay.
We worked very well together, but there's not like a defined thing. It's not like, he was excellent at computer coding and I was excellent at, building processors. It's not that, because look, it's a human currency, and we're both people, slightly different personality traits, but much of which is quite similar values and similar sort of ways of working, similar backgrounds.
Okay.
So, we do bring certain things to the table, and there's certain stuff that you send your best player into every game, and there's certain things where there'll be a big meeting that I know I would be a better fit for, and there's certain ones that he would. Do you know what I mean? Like you put yourself up. It's about knowing that as well. There's people who work for me who are better at certain things than I am.
Mm.
So if there's a meeting, it's like, oh no, that's not. God, if I did that,
Yeah,
not as good as if that person did it. So you did.
Yeah.
So yeah, you kind of, you just sort of feel your way, I suppose.
Understood. So you've grown, like, what pillars would you say the big pillars of growth have been in the business? Because you've gone like to 20 plus people.
Yeah.
Clearly that's a big pillar.
Yeah.
Then you've gone, what's the next? Let's say you've gone to over 50 people. That's a pretty big move, right?
Yeah.
Your now title is owner, which is
Yeah.
quite interesting. So I'd love to know sort of how hands-on you remain in the business, and when did you start putting in these pillars of CEOs and MDs, etc.?
It grew over time, the one by one, and then every now and then you have a reshuffle to resort everything out. But what is my role in the business? I suppose that I hold a few serious senior relationships. I take responsibility for doing like brand extensions and innovations and working with people on growth. Business development to a point, by which I mean that, I'll fly to Saudi and go and meet the guys from a big giga project. I know that I can have that conversation based on my experience before then bringing in the agency to do the pitch of the proposal.
Yeah.
I think I still add some value in the area of culture, because I know when I go in the office, I know that I can ignite some energy.
You seem to be very passionate about that.
Yeah, I like it. I think energy is everything. I think energy is everything in a business, in every area of the business. I think it's very important. Otherwise, you stagnate, and things become stale, and then you're stale, you fail. Did I say that earlier?
Yeah. No, this is a new one.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, you coast your toast, and you're stale, you fail.
Yeah.
So, that's important to me. So I kind of take a bit, and then the great thing is when you're the owner, you can get involved in the things you want to get involved in, but you've got trust that other people. And then, look, is there an element of firefighting where things are going wrong or whatever, that I get a call to go in and sort stuff out? There is, but I try and first make everybody take responsibility for their own pieces. But you asked, what were the milestones, I suppose, in terms of growth? And I don't know whether it was by number. Like you were saying, you got 20 people.
Sometimes people define it by head count, but if yours is different,
maybe.
Please explain.
I'm trying to really think about it. Like the way it's possibly easy to work backwards and go where we are now. The business is myself and Matt as owners. We have 7 Media, which is social media, PR, communications, strategy. 7 Studios, which is everything from creative strategy through to graphic design, animation, videography, production, editing, anything that is visual. I guess our photographers work into 7 Studios, and 7 Digital, which is the programmatic, performance-based stuff. That's all data, numbers, execution of the content from there through digital means, and all those things work together. Now, there's a person who's a managing director of 7 Media, overseeing like 4 people who have different specific skill sets within that media department. There's 2 managing directors at 7 Studios, one who's creative and one who's production, and then there's managing partner of 7 Digital.
Yeah. So
you kind of have this pyramid, and then everyone reports into them.
Yeah.
40 people report into Studios, around, I don't know, 80 people into media, a smaller number into digital, and then our COO handles all the operations team, of which there's about, I don't know, 8, 9 people or something like that.
Okay. And I'm curious, in 15 years that you've been in business, right, the world has had a few things that's happened that have made things a little bit volatile, right? We're in a part of the world where, everyone would have when I describe the Middle East to people, I said, it can be quite volatile, right? It can be quite, there's a lot, business can be hit by you can be had a left hook where you didn't see a left hook coming from quite a few times.
Yeah.
What's been the toughest period that you've had in the business?
I think probably just there was a real short area. Probably the start of COVID, the uncertainty of all of that.
Yeah.
I think we around March or so, 2020 was it? We had around 40 clients, 40, either cancelled big events that we were doing the comms for, pause their contract, which was a new word to me. I didn't know contracts could get paused, but that's what was happening.
Yeah.
Or just cancel the contracts because they couldn't commit to pay because they were unsure whether they'd pay. And that's a big thing because money kind of stops and you're like, oh, right, okay, this is serious. We were lucky for several different reasons. One, we had a really good video and animation team, and we were already doing social media work. So we could pivot quite quickly from, that was a new word of the time, pivot.
Yeah.
I think that was the first time I ever used that.
Everyone uses it now,
in COVID times.
Yeah.
But we were able to channel things away from live events and press conferences and onto things online. Brands still needed to communicate with customers, but we were able to provide solutions for that. And the other thing was that we had great relationships with the government of the UAE. The government of the UAE needed to tell that story about, collective responsibility to get through COVID. There's a public health announcements. And one of our clients is, we have multiple different clients in that area. So, the business that was lost out of the private sector or pivoted was more than made up for in the end by the government work and the need for them to communicate to the public. And the way they did it was heralded internationally as best practice. So it was an interesting thing to be part of. I think the other thing was, while we did have good systems in place by then, and we were a proper robust company, not like we were, at the very start, it made us really look under the bonnet of the company and really properly look at everything and where we were fatty and all of those kind of things. So it really it perhaps reintroduced me properly to the workings of my own business.
Okay.
So I take some positives from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other times that you can think of as being hard or tough?
You know what? I'm so sorry, but I can't.
Why are you apologising?
Because I feel like most people go, yeah, well, my hardest point was X, and you should have an answer to that. But I don't know. I feel like every year will face its own challenge, and you've just got to take them one step at a time. I don't. Even the COVID thing, I don't feel like it was devastating as some people make out.
Well, no, I mean, you had a diversified offering, so you're able to channel into the bits of your business that, were pre-set up and fortuitously ready for it. But also, you've got government as a foundation of your client, right? So the public sector was spending. So it's quite, when you described your business to me, I knew that you were going to be COVID resilient just from what you said, right?
Okay,
but that's hindsight. At the time, we all thought the world was going to end. I remember having a conversation with my business partner going, why don't we just shut the doors, right? And literally just pause, see if we could just stop everything and see what it looks like in 6 months. Yeah. Because, I thought no one was ever going to hire again and we were all going to be, wearing masks for the rest of our lives. So, you don't really know. As it turns out, we had quite a few of our clients got smashed, but we had the other ones that basically had like turbo boosters put inside them. So we were pretty lucky. Now, you as the owner, we spoke before off camera, and I got to understand there's some important things to you. You're in a position where you're one of the few independent businesses that have done pretty well out here. I'm no doubt, like with the world's eyes on the Middle East right now, I'm sure you've had quite a few offers that have come through to you for the business, right? What's important to you as an owner? What do you want to sell? How do you want to live your life? Have you thought about this now that you're sort of 15 years into the journey? I feel like you've been doing a lot of reflecting. So where do you see this going?
Well, from a reflective perspective, I told you earlier in this conversation that I didn't set it up for money particularly. I set it up for freedom, flexibility, and probably a bit of ego or something like that. Now, you do well at something, of course, you get paid as you go. But but that freedom, that flexibility and variety that I'm able to create for myself remains really important to me. I get a lot from it. We've had 2 serious offers to buy the company. Neither of them made any sense to me. Like, it just didn't work because we've got a good business and it can continue. And, there's an emotional thing around selling a business as well, I guess. We like it. And my kids like it. My oldest son, Ollie, was doing his GCSE options and he said, "Dad, what GCSEs do I need to do to get a job at 7 Media?" And his aspiration, whether it'll end up there in the end, is that he wants to get an entry-level job after university at 7 Media. And one day he said, "I want to run the place." So, look, it can provide something, and growth, by the way, it can continue to grow. There's more that we can do. It's not all she wrote yet.
Yeah.
Like, why would anyone be buying you? Because they could see that it could grow, right?
Yeah.
So why don't I do that instead of giving somebody else the opportunity? And I don't need that upfront money now. Do you know what I mean? Like, what would I do with it?
Yeah, but some people, Greg, I speak to a lot of people, and some people actually, they feel like that chapter's done and they want to now move on to something else. They want to pursue another path,
Yes.
or that they've taken it as far as they can take it.
Yeah,
you clearly don't have any of those feelings whatsoever.
No, because I can create variety for myself. Under the 7 banner, I can do multiple different innovations, and we do, and we continue to do so. My wife and I, we've worked together on numerous different enterprises outside of the businesses. She's also an entrepreneur. She's the owner of Sticky Ginger, which is creative
another
communications agency.
Yeah.
They look after global brands, Apple, Nike, and all that kind of thing. So we have that great stuff in common.
Do you compete against each other at times?
A little bit, but that's reasonably healthy. It was when we got together. It was about a few years ago. It was 7 years ago, and we kind of finding that thing, competition being healthy or unhealthy, or like, because we're both quite ego driven, but we got through that quite quickly, and we're not always on the same sort of sectors, if you know what I mean. We compete a little bit.
That's interesting.
Yeah. But we're able to give each other good advice. We also understand the madness of the industry within which we work. Yeah. So when we go home, we can have proper conversations. And
there's a little degree of understanding there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's not boring to us. We talk about all sorts of stuff within the industry. It's good.
Yeah. Greg, what's interesting is a lot of people have a problem with the word lifestyle business, right? And I think that a lot of people bracket a lifestyle business as something that someone does, on the side, or doesn't really take that seriously. Yeah. Now, listening to yours, you've built a lifestyle business, but you've built a powerful lifestyle business because it gives you a lovely lifestyle with it. And it's one that why would you want to let go of it when you've got a lovely life with it? There's no reason and rationale. There's no push, right?
Yeah.
You mentioned to me off camera that you've got, you live between Dubai, Norway, and the UK, right?
Yes, yeah.
So it gives you the ability to have a lovely life.
Look, it seems to work. Principally, we have properties here, but we live in one in City Walk.
Yeah.
I have a house, as I told you, in the UK. The kids go to school in the UK. We have a beautiful holiday home in the Western Fjords of Norway, and that provides the thinking space and the kind of variety that we need out of life. And I've got a great wife, and she's exciting, and she's inspiring, and she's adventurous, and she kind of pushes me to do things even beyond what I would have done in the first place. So we work really well together, and I think that for me, it's about work-life integration. This whole idea of work-life balance, where you stop and then dedicate yourself purely to leisure time, and don't dare to think about work. Well, that's just silly.
Yeah.
But if you integrate it 365 days a year, you know what's important, when you need to be somewhere in person to get things over the line and to achieve things. But then when we're in Norway in the sauna and jumping in the fjord, I'll be on the phone or I'll have a thought. I'll send a WhatsApp. So work is part of my kind of fabric.
Yeah.
But it facilitates the life that I want to live.
That's a great way of putting it. And what advice would you give to anyone looking to go and set up an agency today?
Jeez, an agency like
or would you say set up an agency? Do you think what you guys set up at 7 Media, do you think there's still a market to set up a similar business to that now?
I think that there's probably a niche in content creation. I think because I don't think any more PR agencies are particularly needed in this world.
But there seems to be a whole lot opening up. There's not many more recruitment companies either, by the way. It's the same thing.
I suppose it's fine, a niche. There's one company who I don't know locally. I won't name them because I don't know whether they're any good or not, but I found out about them the other day. Someone said, "Oh no, they're okay." They've specialized in Web3, crypto, and all of these different things. So I think if you can find a niche, that's not bad advice, because they'll be able to build something out with a level of expertise in that area. I think that if you landed here today saying, I want to launch an agency that is going to be all things to all people, strategy, content creation, media relations, videography, digital marketing, it'd be very, very difficult to do. You got to start somewhere, and I would suggest that content creation would be a good entry.
Yours was storytelling, really, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was your niche. You knew how to tell a great story.
It's such a catch-all thing, that, because really storytelling is at the
But at the time, there was no one going with that. I can't recall, and I was around. I can't recall anyone going in with that approach.
No, you're probably right. It's a word that's used an awful lot now, though, I think. But that's the thing. The story's right at the center, and then how you then take it to the people and move them to do the thing that you want to do. Look, I always say this, that storytelling has been around since when hundreds of thousands of years, when humans first started settling in one place after being hunter-gatherers. They needed to tell stories to get collective fears and all of those things to keep people in line. Otherwise, chaos and anarchy. So stories hold everybody together, really. Everything's built around storytelling. So,
but you had a CV to back it up as well, right? Yeah, you just from you walking through your career now, you've been telling telling stories in publications. That was you were telling stories for the National. You came into agency world. It was clear that you could tell a story, right? What in the industry right now is scaring? Is there anything there you're going? Because a lot of people talk about technology and the impact that's going to have on their business. Is there anything that you're seeing that is keeping you up at night?
No, I don't think so. I mean, people say that AI will be the death of creators, and it will be the death of everything. But I think it's a tool, and I think if you embrace it, much like the Industrial Revolution or any of the things that have gone before, the people who embrace things and use it as a tool, don't try and make it do your work for you. Just like all different types of emerging technology, use them, but don't let them run you. That's it. So, is there anything that sort of scares me in the industry? Not really. I worry a little bit about the kind of about the future of the industry, but I'm also fairly positive about all the different niche startups that are happening.
Okay.
From a commercial perspective, there's people struggling who shouldn't struggle, but at the same time, different things appear. So I don't think that's a worry. It's just change, it's evolution, and it's development.
So if you and I have a catch up in a couple of years, do you have an idea of what 7 will look like then?
We'll be on hoverboards, and that's how we'll get to the office. And we'll. And I think that there's a couple of different things. I think that we may move in the area of having a couple of proprietary publishing platforms under the 7 brand, because owned platforms, owned media is a pretty good thing to have. And if we can do that and build noise, we can leverage that for our own clients, and use it to reach audiences. I think that I feel at the moment like the digital marketing stuff, 7 Digital, is in its infancy, and the power of that, if done properly, could really make us strong in taking content, actionable content, directly to people all over the world. And I think that everything is becoming more global. We represent global brands who want to tell their story in the region. We represent regional brands who want to tell the stories globally. And I think all those worlds are moving across each other, particularly using digital means. The need to be on the ground in Latin America or whatever is not as necessary. Things can be done from here. So potentially we'll have a more global feel as well. But 2 years is no time at all, but it's also very long. Lots of things do happen, as we know, in this market in 2 years.
I used to say 5, now I say 2.
yeah. It's a good point. Yeah. And I've never really tried to plan much more than that. Like when people go, "Where do you see yourself in 10 years?" I don't know. Wow, so far.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's a pleasure having you on the show today. Thanks very much for sharing. I really enjoyed that. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's show. Please do subscribe to the channel. I look forward to seeing you next time.